Kat, do you have a pen? All right. So, what's the sequence to kick off? How does it pop up online? The live stream? Yeah, it's on. Oh, people can see it, right? Yeah, they're seeing it online. Oh, they're seeing that? Yeah. Okay, so I just count you down? When you start, I'll go in. All right, just 30 seconds. All right, guys, we're going to get started in a sec. I know some people are lost in the rabbit warren of CDU parking, but we've got to kick off because we've got some time constraints at the back end. So just give us like 30 seconds and we'll kick it off. All right, Schoolie, the main event, mate. And just for reference, we've got like hundreds of people online in Perth, Sydney, Melbourne. So we'll kick a live stream off, and all of this is just going to be live on YouTube. So. All right, when you're ready. All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the annual general meeting of Tivan Limited, the first one. We're very, very proud to be hosting it here in Darwin at Charles Darwin University. Very grateful for the turnout. It's very unusual for an ASX-listed company to hold an AGM in Darwin. We're very mindful of doing that, though, with our future plans, and also where the company started, which we'll talk about in the next couple of hours. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you as well to all our shareholders across the country, certainly Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth. There's a very wide following for Tivan and the events here over the past 12 months. This event's being live streamed, so hello to everyone out there, and thank you very much for the engagement. I'd like to acknowledge at the top Larrakia, traditional owners of the land and the waters surrounding Darwin. I'm very grateful that Mark Motlop's here today, Chairman of LDC, Larrakia Development Corporation. We obviously acknowledge elders, past, present and emerging. And as well, I want to emphasise, as we go through the next couple of hours, the traditional owner outreach engagement of Tivan over the past 12 months. It's unique, it's progressive, it's very important, and once again, we're very, very grateful to have Larrakia Development Corporation represented here today in Mark. I'd also like to say a quick in memoriam to Ernie Rosendahl. Ernie's a major shareholder of TNG for many years. He passed away mid-year, so we're just sending our condolences and respects to Sylvia down in Wollongong, and want to give a shout out to Ernie because he was a great supporter during the campaign over the last 12 months, and also a great friend of mine. So thank you, Ernie. I'd like now to acknowledge, of course, that it's 3:30 in Darwin time. We have some formalities to get through for the next 15, 20 minutes or so, and then we'll be into the main event. I ask that you do not disrupt this meeting, so can you please turn off mobile phones? I ask that shareholders ensure that they have registered their attendance with the representatives of Ward Keller at the entrance, which I think you've all done. Shareholders and validly appointed proxies and corporate representatives will have received a green admission card. I'm advised that a quorum is present, and therefore I officially declare this meeting of Tivan Limited open. Thank you once again for your attendance. I'm joined here, happily, by the board of Tivan. It's Guy DeBell, who joined the company 3 months ago, Christine Charles in April, and Dr. Anthony Robinson, who joined with me about a year ago now. We also have significant representation from Tivan. We have Michael, Chris, and Brendan Nicol from our engineering team. They're based in Perth. Helen Yang, our commercial manager in Darwin, who's done wonders to bring this event together. Thank you, Helen, for that. Katrina Aratune, who's been working closely with me all year, based in Sydney. Stephen Walsh, I should say, probably the most disappointed man in the Northern Territory today. He's our chief geologist. He's come down with COVID, so he can't be here today. So shout out to Stephen. Tony Bevan as well, our company secretary. The company's chief financial officer, Jason Giltay, is in Perth today, our auditor, Glenn Brooks of KPMG. They're both attending via video link, I'm advised, and of course will be playing an important role in the meeting today. In terms of the process for today's meeting, all items of business will be voted for via a poll. The poll will be conducted by Ward Keller, our lawyers here in Darwin, and voting cards will be collected at the end of the formal part of the meeting once all the resolutions have been put forward. The results of the poll will be tallied and announced on the ASX platform, if not this evening, then certainly first thing Monday. The notice of meeting was available to all shareholders, and I will take the notice as have been read. I will be allowing questions from shareholders, proxy holders, and validly appointed corporate representatives on each resolution as it is being considered. I ask that you keep your questions to the matter being considered. Please address all questions to me as chair of this meeting. Please state your name before speaking and hold your green and yellow admission card so that I can see you're entitled to speak at the meeting. After the poll is closed, shareholders will have an opportunity to ask questions about or make comments on the management of the company. And before we move on, I'd now like to invite Kevin Stevens from Ward Keller, our Darwin representative, to outline the process for the conduct of the poll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Persons entitled to vote on the poll are all shareholders, representatives and attorneys of shareholders who hold a green admissions card. On the reverse of your green admissions card is your voting papers and instructions. What I'd like to remind you is after marking each of the 16 resolutions that are there, would you please ensure that you print your name and sign the paper where indicated on the ballot box. Later on, at the end of all that, we will have someone come around with a ballot box for you to deposit. And that's it.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, and with that, I have the privilege of declaring the poll open, and we'll move on to the formal business of the meeting. Now, I can advise that we had a fantastic voter turnout at Tivan this year. It's traditional for mining companies in this part of the sector to have turnout around 20, maybe 25% of shareholders. We recorded a 46.5% voter turnout, 730,450,442 valid proxies have been received, and that's a great indication of the level of engagement at the company, as I said before, right across the country and overseas as well. The first item of business deals with the financial statements and reports for the financial year ended 30 June 2023, which are now laid before the meeting. As previously mentioned, representatives from Tivan's auditors, KPMG, are present today to answer any questions shareholders and proxy holders may wish to direct to them in relation to the conduct of their audit, the preparation and content of the auditor's report, the accounting policies adopted by the company in relation to the preparation of financial statements, or the independence of the auditor in relation to the conduct of the audit. I now invite questions and comments on the financial statements and reports. Hello, Jason. Hello, Glenn.
Hello, Grant. How are you?
Good, mate. I think we're not going to have any questions on this item. So there are no questions, and that enables me to move on to the resolutions. So, Resolution 1 deals with the adoption of the Remuneration Report. This is a non-binding advisory ordinary resolution. Unless there is an objection, I will take the motion as being read and direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution. So without breaking the suspense, you'll see that this resolution's been carried by over 99%, which is practically unanimous as far as ASX listed companies are concerned, and this will repeat as we go through the resolutions. So I won't dilly-dally on these sorts of items because I just like to keep the meeting flowing today. There being no questions or comments, I now would invite you to vote on the resolution on your voting card for those people today who are voting from the floor. Okay, I think we can move on straight away to resolutions 2 and 3, which deal with the election of Ms. Christine Charles and Dr. Guy Debelle as directors. I advise that these resolutions are ordinary resolutions, and as explained in more detail at the notice of the meeting, having been appointed as a director by the board since the last annual general meeting, Christine and Guy are required by the Constitution and the ASX listing rules to seek election at this annual general meeting of shareholders. And unless there is an objection, I will take the motions as being read and direct your attention to the screen, which again displays a summary of proxies for these resolutions. Wow, it's a tight race there, Guy, Christine. All right. So once again, votes from the floor. Any questions, comments? I think we can just move on. So there being no questions, we can vote. And again, there are only a few shareholders voting from the floor, so in the interest of time, I'd just like to keep moving forward. Resolutions 4 and 5 deal with the ratification of KRR shares and the issue of placement shares to sophisticated institutional investors. For context, we issued 100 million shares to a company called KRR, King River Resources, back in February Q1. That was to part finance the acquisition of the Speewah resource in Wyndham, which we'll learn more about as the meeting goes on today. I advise that these resolutions are ordinary resolutions. As explained in more detail in the notice of meeting, the company is seeking ratification of the shares issued since the last annual general meeting and restore its ability under the listing rules to issue up to 15% of ordinary shares without obtaining shareholder approval. Unless there is an objection, I will take the motions as being read and direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for these resolutions. Any open and usable proxies held by me as chairperson of the meeting will be voted in favour of the resolutions. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of these resolutions. Any questions or comments once again? There being no more questions, I will now invite you to vote on resolution 4 and 5 on your voting card. Now, as one of the next resolutions involves myself, you'll see us pop up and down the next little while. Guy is going to take over the chair of the meeting for now.
So we move on to resolutions 6 to 8, which deal with the issue of placement shares to directors. So I advise that these resolutions are ordinary resolutions. As explained in more detail in the notices of meeting, the company is required to seek shareholder approval so that 3 directors, Mr Wilson, Dr Robinson and Ms Charles, can subscribe for 25,000 of shares as part of the placement announced in July 2023 on the same terms as an unrelated party, i.e. everyone else. Unless there is an objection, I will take the motions as being read and direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for these resolutions. The directors, with Mr Wilson, Ms Charles and Dr Robinson abstaining as required, unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of these resolutions. Are there any questions or comments in relation to these resolutions? There being no more questions, I now invite you to vote on resolutions 6, 7 and 8 via your voting card. And with that, I'll hand back the chair to Grant.
All right, moving right along. Resolution 9 deals with the issue of shares to a director. As explained in more detail in the notice of meeting, the company is required to seek shareholder approval so that a newly appointed director, in this case Guy Debelle, can subscribe for $25,000 of shares on the same terms as everyone else who participated in the previously mentioned placement that was announced in July 2023. Unless there's an objection, I'll take the motion as read and direct your attention to the screen, which displays the summary of proxies for this resolution. Any open and usable proxies held by me as chairperson of the meeting will be voted in favour of this resolution. The directors, with Dr Debelle now abstaining, unanimously recommend the shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. Are there any questions, comments related to this resolution? There being no more questions, I now invite you to vote on resolution 9 with your voting card. And that enables us to move straight away to Resolution 10, which deals with the issue of equity securities under the awards plan. I advise this resolution is an ordinary resolution. As explained in more detail in the notice of meeting, the company is required to seek shareholder approval to establish an updated incentive plan. And this is important because one of the main initiatives that we've advanced this year in terms of the governance regime and promoting alignment with shareholders is to have a very progressive and highly aligned incentive scheme for management and for our team as well. So we have updated and fully revised the incentive plan as part of a remuneration framework specifically structured to align the remuneration of the team with project delivery timelines and the interests of shareholders. Unless there is an objection, I will take this motion as being read and direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution. Any open usable proxies held by me as chair will be voted in favour of this important resolution. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. Are there any questions or comments? There being no questions, I invite you to vote on Resolution 10. Now, Resolutions 11 and 13, also part of this revised incentive structure, deal with the issue of options to non-executive directors, i.e. the board. I advise that these resolutions are ordinary resolutions. As explained in more detail in the notice of meeting, the company is required to seek shareholder approval so that it can grant options to each of the 3 non-executive directors as part of the long-term incentive plan. Unless there's an objection, I will take the motions as being read and direct your attention to the screen. Any open and usable proxies held by me as chair will be voted in favour of the resolutions. The directors, with Christine, Guy and Anthony abstaining as required, unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of these resolutions. Are there any questions or comments? There being no questions, I now invite you to vote on Resolutions 11, 12 and 13 via your voting card. As this resolution specifically involves myself, the next one, I will hand back over, this time to Christine, while the resolution is being considered.
Resolution 14 deals with the issue of options to Mr Wilson. I advise that this resolution is an ordinary resolution. As explained in more detail in the notice of meeting, the company is required to seek shareholder approval before it can issue the options that it has agreed to in connection with Mr Wilson's appointment as Executive Chairman. Unless there is an objection, I will take this motion as being read and direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution. Any open and usable proxies held by me as interim chairperson of the meeting will be voted in favour of this resolution. The directors, with Mr Wilson abstaining, unanimously recommend the shareholders vote in favour of the resolution. Are there any questions or comments in relation to this resolution? There being no questions, I now invite you to vote on Resolution 14 via your voting card. I will now hand back the chair of the meeting to Grant Wilson.
Okay, thanks Christine. Nearly there, 2 to go. Resolution 15 deals with the approval of the additional 10% placement capacity. I advise this resolution is a special resolution. As such, it requires a 75% majority to be passed. As explained in more detail in the notice of meeting, the company is required to seek shareholder approval to increase the 15% placement capacity allowed under the listing rules by an extra 10% to 25%. Unless there is an objection, I will take the motion as being read and direct your attention to the screen, which displays a summary of proxies for this resolution. Any open and usable proxies held by me as chairperson of the meeting will be voted in favour of this resolution. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. Are there any questions or comments related to this resolution? There being no questions, I now invite you to vote on Resolution 15. Okay, finally, Resolution 16 deals with the renewal of proportional takeover provisions. I advise this resolution is a special resolution and as such requires a 75% majority to be passed. Again, a special resolution. As explained in more detail in the notice of meeting, The company is required to obtain shareholder approvals so that it can include in its constitution provisions requiring that a proportional or partial takeover offer be approved by a majority of shareholders before it may proceed. Unless there is an objection, I will take the motion as being read and direct your attention to the screen which displays a summary of proxies. Any open and usable proxies held by me as chair of the meeting will be voted in favour of this resolution. The directors unanimously recommend that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. Any questions or comments? There being no questions, I now invite you to vote on Resolution 16. And there we are. Thank you very much for these formalities. They're very important as we move the company forward. And we really sincerely appreciate the support of shareholders. These are incredible results for a company that's been through a transition such as ours over the past 12 months. As that was the last resolution, I want to now ask you to finalise your votes. In a few minutes, Ward Keller will collect all your voting cards. If you have any questions about how to fill in your voting card, please raise your hand and Ward Keller will assist. So for those on the floor, this is your moment to hand the voting cards over to Ward Keller. Kevin, thank you. Great. This won't take long. And thank you again for those Darwin-based shareholders for showing up, exercising your important right to vote from the floor. It's very cool. For those online, this will not take long. But it's very important that we follow due process. We do not want to do this meeting again. Okay, Kevin? Great. As all voting cards have been collected, I now declare the poll closed. The votes will now be counted by Ward Keller and we'll announce the results later in the meeting. But again, no prizes for guessing today. That concludes the formal business of today's meeting, and now we can move into the main event, which is a team effort today. I'll be speaking for about half an hour, explaining things that happened at TNG and then Tivan over the past year, before handing off to Anthony, who has to catch a plane, so he'll be first on deck. All right, so our first slide today. Here we go. 2023 at Tivan was a year of transformative change. I said it would be. Back in, even during the campaign against the board of TNG, I campaigned on a platform of resetting the company, reviewing the project, and ultimately renewing. And we've done a lot of renewing this year. That list of achievements this year is staggering. I don't believe there's a prior in Australian corporate history of a company picked up on the brink and turned into what we now have with Tivan. Done 10 deals this year, 10. And deals are not easy to do in this space, let alone at the pace we did them, and let alone with the impact that they had this year and will have in the years ahead. We've built a company now with the foundations to scale globally through the energy transition. It's an incredible set of achievements, and it's most of all a reflection of the team that we have. Now, we made some hard changes, of course. 2 boards were dismissed summarily. They deserve to go, 100%. Most of the team now that was there is also left as well, in 2 different phases, some hostile, some orderly through mid-year. But what we have is a clean sheet and a basis from which to build. And we built and built and built, and we'll continue to build in the years ahead. The 2 most important decisions were right at the top. We had 3 months of relief from continuous disclosure in the stock market, where we did not have to come forward and explain to the market and shareholders how bad it really was. Had we had to do that, the share price would have gone to 0 straight away. Absolutely no doubt. We would have liquidated it. The only asset that we had of realisable value was a little bit of cash on the balance sheet. It's not to say that Mount Peak isn't a strategically important resource, it is. And it's not to say that the Tivan technology that had been worked on for 5 to 10 years isn't fundamentally important and has real value, but it needs to be retooled, redeployed, and reshored, which is what we've done successfully this year. What we found was a train wreck, an absolute train wreck. I've worked all over the world in all sorts of industries. I've never seen a company so poorly managed, so selfishly managed, so ineptly managed. There were only two things that management was solving for at the end, which was to maximise the amount of money they got from shareholders into their own pocket and to minimise the possibility of litigation against them. That was it. That was all they were doing. And these are the hard truths that we walked into, and we made some radical decisions right at the top with the strong support, might I say, of the NT government. The NT government has been wonderful for Tivan. They've been agile, they've been smart, they've listened at the right times, and they've helped us navigate an almost impossible situation. And we really, really appreciate that. The first and most important decision was to bring the company back to the Middle Arm Sustainable Development Precinct. We were the first company to secure a do not deal letter from the NT government. That was February. Despite the abyss we were in, the government trusted me sufficiently to convey that great privilege. And once we secured that, we were able to secure Speewah. Now, Speewah is the most important resource in the world for vanadium, and it's not close. This is a sovereign asset for the country. It's capable of supporting a project for 200 to 300 years, if not more. It is an incredible endowment, and we're going to look after it, once again, in lockstep with the traditional owners of Speewah over in Wyndham. Those two major transactions set the tone for the year, and you've seen dynamic change since, specifically focused on building out the capabilities and networks at the company. That was especially prominent through Q2, all the while maintaining alignment with existing shareholders of the company that we understand and acknowledge have had a very, very difficult time over 5 to 10 years. Now, I am a warrior for shareholders. I'm a major shareholder myself. I own 1.6, 1.7% of the company, and we've taken every effort all the way through this year to ensure that alignment with shareholders has been promoted and achieved, not least through a capital raise mid-year, which was priced at a 1% discount, dramatically different than everyone else in the sector, to ensure that existing shareholders were not diluted and that the company had a chance to continue to heal and ultimately close out many more deals through Q3 and lead us to this very important event today. So I would defy anyone to find a year like that. It's miraculous, we're very proud, and once again, it's a product of an enormous amount of teamwork and effort. I want to commend the team, the board, our technical advisory group that we'll hear from later as well. It is an achievement, I think, for the ages, and we'll see that. We'll see that. We'll look back in years to come at this year as not just foundational, transformative, but a year where everyone was involved and did something quite miraculous. So we're standing here today, we're very proud of this list of achievements, and I want to contextualise that a little bit further by turning to the next slide, where we explain what we now have at Tivan, which is a durable list of competitive advantages, unlike anything else in the junior resources sector in this country. The two foundational building blocks of what we're proposing to do, which is to build a full-scale renewable value chain in Northern Australia, a true sovereign capability which can meaningfully contribute to the energy transition and ultimately scale on a global basis. To do that very ambitious thing, all without any dependency on China, you need to have the perfect setup. Again, the best resource in the world, which is Speewah, by far, not close. Lowest strip ratio, closest to port, highest grade, incredible long life, with supportive traditional owners. We have that in Speewah. Then comes the technology. We're going to use a traditional technology to access the vanadium as fast as we can. We're moving fast, you can see that. We want to get to market, we want to get to revenue. That will help the company in terms of its market capitalisation, help facilitation, prove up the concepts that we're talking about in conjunction with A-list partners that we've signed all year and will continue to sign A-list partners, both here in Australia and overseas, most notably in places like Japan and maybe Korea. The technology that we announced on Tuesday with CSIRO is, though, fundamentally important, and we think will ultimately be the technology that prevails and that is appropriate for a resource of the calibre of Speewah. The Tivan Plus technology enables those hard rocks to be broken down using hydrochloric acid into three components: vanadium, titanium, and iron. That gives you 3 revenue streams. It also means that you can lower environmental impacts, which is very, very important. And it also means that we're able, once again, to reduce dependencies on foreign players. The idea of a sovereign capability is critically important to Tivan and to the critical mineral sector in Australia now and in the decades ahead. And we'll be working on this technology in a profoundly important collaboration with CSIRO. This technology was worked on in various shapes and forms in labs in Europe for 5 to 10 years. And there was still a pathway there which we could have pursued. I said no to that. And we brought it back, and we've put our teams together, the best people in Australia, if not the world, in this space, at Tivan, at CSIRO. We've brought together specific aspects of the flow sheet that we had been working on and merged it with patented advances, potentially a step change in this space that CSIRO has achieved. And we've also created durable alignment between CSIRO and Tivan, meaning the way that we're paying for this is if we develop this technology and we pay for this technology and we deploy it at Speewah and the company's making a lot of revenue, CSIRO will receive some of that revenue. And that's great. That's what alignment is about. And do you know what CSIRO will do with that money? In 2030, whenever it may be, they will plough that back in to R&D in this country. And that will help them advance the next breakthrough that their scientists come up with. It's a very novel deal. I don't believe CSIRO, and Christine will be able to talk to this, has ever entered into such a deal before with such a small company as we are right now. Their risk is the technological breakthrough that they've made gets marooned with us. But they've taken that risk because they believe in our team, they believe in our resource, they believe in our ethos. They know that we're working on the science, but also that we're aligned in terms of advancing the national mission. And Mark will be pleased to hear they were actually very appreciative of the traditional owner engagement that we've pursued at Tivan this year, the frameworks, and of course this landmark deal that we've secured with Aracare Development Corporation. The CSIRO, they're very focused on having impacts broadly defined in Australia, including the new CEO, Chief Executive Doug Hilton, who made a public statement of support for Tivan in that release. Very unusual for the CEO to do that. I think part of that was recognising the broader drives and ethos that we have at Tivan, and I know that the traditional owner aspect of what we've achieved this year loomed large in their thinking. So with those 2 foundational building blocks, we can move into the teams and partners. I do believe we have the best team in the country by far. It's not close. The partners we're bringing in, Hatch Engineering in particular, the most advanced in terms of Canadian recovery of engineering groups in the world. We know them well. They've built similar projects in South Africa and Brazil. They're working with us. There's a very important workshop at the end of November, and we're grateful and excited to be working with them. The community engagement was spoken to, partly when we had that outage, but it's best in class, and we'll hear a little bit more about that from our technical advisory group, Simon Flowers, in a minute. On government, it's very important in this sector in particular that any critical mineral aspirant has strong government relations. Now, I've been working very closely all year with NT government, but also WA government, and certainly in Canberra as well. And Canberra's grappling with this issue of the energy transition, critical mineral sector, interplay between where they want to intervene, where they should, where they shouldn't. Obviously, the geopolitics are looming large. We are now right at the frontier, Tivan, of a third wave of critical minerals. Firstly, there was rare earths. Secondarily, there was lithium. Tivan will lead vanadium and grid storage. Now, to navigate that in lockstep with the critical mineral strategy, which we contributed to, is very, very important. And we've encapsulated all of that in our work this year. And I would say that having Christine join us in April, and certainly Guy most recently, has moved us to the top table. Some of you will have even seen myself and the Prime Minister recently on Twitter talking about real things, critical minerals, middle arm. And that was a private session, which was important. But fair to say, particularly with Guy on the East Coast, we have access to and informed discussions with the most important bureaucrats, technocrats and government officials in the country. And that's appropriate because what Tivan has here is of strategic national importance to Australia and especially to Darwin. We believe Darwin and certainly Middle Arm is effectively ground zero in the energy transition. It's that important. It's that important to get it right. So very, very pleased and working very closely with government. A final piece, which I'll come to in a second, is capital markets. Obviously, I come from that part of the world. Guy in his central banking role knows capital markets probably better than anyone in Australia. And it's very important that Tivan, as we grow, has what we've already proven to shareholders, which is superior access to capital markets. Ability to raise money is often a constraint in this sector, and it's frequently mismanaged, and oftentimes that is because management is misaligned to shareholders. Not in our case, and we'll talk about that more as we go forward today. But I wanted to emphasize this pyramid because these advantages that we have, if you compare Tivan to any other company in this sector, compellingly, we're the best at what we do in all of those categories. Certainly in the vanadium sector, and again, sometimes I get a little bit of trouble talking about other companies in the sector. I'm not meant to, apparently. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I think part of the issue with boards in the junior mining sector, and certainly with executives, is that there is this culture of silence. Now, I believe in healthy competition, competitive tension. I've worked in New York, Singapore, London. I am a very competitive person. And Tivan will win, absolutely. And I think we'll show up a lot of people. I think we already have. And what I'm looking for most of all is for us to retain and enhance the competitive advantages we need to ensure the company can build the projects that we now have underway and ultimately ensure that we can compete with China. The competition for vanadium and redox flow batteries, energy transition, is not in Australia. Not in Australia, not for Tivan. This is global. It will be Tivan versus China head-to-head in the years to come. And we need to maximize, promote all of those competitive advantages which we've put in place this year. Okay. Next slide. To emphasize that the market has respected our achievements, again, a company that, in my view, was on the brink of failure, meaning that the share price, in my view, through that period back in December, January, could well have been marked at zero. That's how severe this was. Severe. And yet, we are one of the only companies in the ASX junior resources sector that's up on the year. Marked it on Wednesday. Now, I have to be a little bit careful here. ASX gets a little bit jumpy when it comes to peer comparisons. This chart is trimmed for extreme outcomes. A company like Azura's found lithium near Karratha, their share price exploded. There are companies in our peer group that have failed this year. AVZ, Leo. So I've taken out here the tops and the tails. This is a representative cross-section of our peer group, absolutely. Similar market caps, mostly similar stages of development. The average share price in this sector has declined by 50% this year. And we've basically been flat. Now, flat's not acceptable, of course, to us, and it won't be in the future. If we're on track, the upside for Tivan's share price is unbounded. I've said that before, I'll say it again, it is unbounded. What we have fundamentally, there is no limit to what this company is worth if we can stay on track. So the market's respected our achievements, these hard-won moves all year, and I'll address further a specific initiative that we're looking to undertake, which we believe will enhance the prospects for the share price in addition to all the fundamentals that we have in place and all of the more traditional initiatives that we'll be pursuing at velocity pace next year. So, next slide. These are the three brief updates. So, when we say update in these slides, what I mean is this is new information. We've not shown this slide publicly before to shareholders, and I'm providing just three of these today. And the purpose here is to keep shareholders informed. We've radically overhauled comms this year. We've set in place policies of forthright, timely communications. We've done lots of media, and we'll keep that up. Shareholders have a right to know. I said I was going to update timelines. I want to update timelines only when we are highly confident that it's on track. Now, I've mentioned before that we have a very important workshop with Hatch on the Speewah project at the end of November. The purpose of that very important workshop, involving about 15 people from Hatch, independent facilitator, all of our team, myself, is to bed down the final flow sheet for the PFS, pre-feasibility study, and to ensure that we have the most credible path to print a big, robust PFS outcome for Speewah in Q3 next year. Beyond that, lies a definitive feasibility study. Beyond that lies FEED and FID and so on and so forth. We are still, at this point, in previous slides, publicly saying end of 2026, second half 2026 for FID at Speewah. There's two-way risk. People know now how fast I work. It's not like anyone else in the sector. We've proven that. So it could be earlier, could be later. That's our central estimate overall for FID at Speewah. The key stepping stone, which we'll work through and we already are working through, for Speewah in terms of PFS, is a conference at the end of November. Everyone's been working on this for months. We put everyone together and we work through these various work streams. I wanted to show this slide as well because it's complex. Sometimes there's impatience, and I'm the least patient person out there, but there can be an impatience. Shareholders and so forth, why can't this happen? Why can't this happen sooner? And there's a trust deficit, or there was, and there was rightly a trust deficit between previous management and shareholders, because previous management said they were going to reach FID in a year's time, and they rinsed and repeated that each year. And it was, to be frank, appalling. This is what it takes for our team, our high-octane team, and the best EPC in the space in the world, Hatch, to bring together a PFS. We're not going to take shortcuts on this. Why? Because we need the best quality PFS possible in the market. That leads to DFS, leads to FID. If you take shortcuts in this area, you might get down those extra stage gates, but you will certainly fail where it matters, which is project finance. You will never survive a project finance round and actually build something if you've taken shortcuts in this area. It will never happen. Because during project finance, they bring in independent technical engineers, financiers to assess what you've done, the quality of your work. And in my view, these stage gates, which are held out by the junior resources sector as important, are oftentimes abused. And I've seen this now for a year. I understand it from the inside. The PFS, DFS is routinely abused. Not in our case. We want to print a robust number which can get us through DFS, project finance, FID. So these are the timelines. It's credible. It will hold up. We'll be working relentlessly to achieve that. And we'll be bringing to market robust numbers which project financiers, government stakeholders can stand behind, all based on the premise that we have best resource. We have the best resource on the planet. Highest grade, once again, closest proximity to port, sits on the surface. This enables us to build project economics which will stack up and define a commercially viable project at Speewah. So the next update. Now, some of you will have seen this chart or a prototype of this in the newspaper. This is basically the grand vision. We'll have to update it because everyone's optioneering right across Northern Australia, of course. But what a beautiful concept this is for all of you in this room as well. Imagine the Northern Territory, Kimberley region if it looked like this. Imagine how spectacular it would be. It's a beautiful thing. This is the vision that I have actually for the top end now. I believe the greatest resource the Northern Territory has is not the gas at Beetaloo, it's the solar resource. The solar resource unlocked with the involvement and inclusion of traditional owners. Everyone participates, everyone wins. If we can get the wholesale cost of electricity in the top end down, right down, 3, 4, 5 cents a kilowatt hour, anything can happen on the back of that. Hydrogen can happen, data centers can happen, all sorts of industry can happen. And it will be permanent because you're tapping into the future. Large-scale solar projects cannot be built in other parts of the world. They don't have the irradiation, they don't have the lands, they don't have the access to port. To get those large-scale solar projects up, you need transmission. Transmission. We need a lot of that. Rewiring the nation is a real initiative. It's very complex on the East Coast. Guy will tell you about that. Up here, almost a greenfield. The transmission from Livingston into Middle Arm is absolutely vital national infrastructure. Many people need it. If you read the Middle Arm submissions, you'll see that. Absolutely critical. Behind that, you need batteries. Large-scale grid storage batteries. What do? They turn the day into night. You can store that energy for 4 to 24 hours with vanadium redox flow batteries. The best technology in the world. Fundamentally different than lithium batteries. Lithium batteries do not work for that purpose. 1, 2 hours maybe. In a car, sure. But the chemistries are compiled in China, mass-produced, these cells, goes into your phone, so on and so forth. Can't do long-stay storage, can't turn the day into night. Flammable, all sorts of recycling problems. Vanadium electrolyte is practically indefinite. These batteries are almost permanent. You have to replace the pumps, maybe the membrane, maybe the control panel. But you build these things and you combine it with large-scale solar, you have a durable competitive advantage for the top of Australia. And you do that with traditional owners going first. This is happening. It's real. It's happening in the Kimberley. It's happening in Darwin, and it's fantastic. So we have a critical role to play, both in terms of championing this vision, but also because it goes through our project finance. And this is key for shareholders to understand. Offtake is vital for a project like this. We have to sell the vanadium before we dig it out of the ground to raise the project finance. In a very unique conception, we expect Tivan to have around 50% offtake in Australia. This does not normally happen. The dig and ship model is dig it up, sell it to China, Korea, maybe Malaysia. We're going to look to do around 50% of local offtake. Middle Arm is absolutely key. We need to prove this concept at a big demand hub for batteries, and that's Middle Arm. A second, sure, Port Hedland, Dampier looks interesting with traditional owners, potentially. Now we could look elsewhere. South Australia, where Guy Harrell's from, is actually very progressive as a jurisdiction, very logical place. But we need hubs, not one buyer of one battery. We need a hub where lots of people need the same thing. Middle Arm is a standout candidate for that. From there, we do, of course, plan to export some vanadium. We'll have a technology partner, hopefully be able to disclose that, where we're up to on that. We like markets like Singapore. I used to work for their government, got a lot of relationships up there, excited about that. And the US is logical as well. The US because some of these batteries are built over there or deployed, but they use Chinese vanadium, Russian vanadium. 70% of global vanadium comes from China, 15% from Russia. Now, you're not accessing a tax credit in the US with Chinese, Russian vanadium. It's not going to happen. You get vanadium from Speewah, processed in Australia with a big green battery on it and a beautiful Tivan symbol. You can export that to the US, do the electrolyte over there, deploy those batteries and get your tax credit. It's a fantastic setup. So this is the vision that we're pursuing. We're moving fast. It's important people understand it as well. Now, at Middle Arm, what does that mean? It means we're a major proponent with a very important tie-up with the traditional owners. And what we're looking to see through the inquiry and beyond is a reassessment of the development pathway to prioritise the terrestrial infrastructure. It's very important, not just for us, not just for Larrakia Energy, but we both need that. Quinbrook needs that. They own Sun Cable. Total Eren needs that. They're building a big solar project. They want to do hydrogen. Now, the product wars will need to happen ultimately if you want to do hydrogen, of course. But there are other players still coming to town. Samsung, that is not a small company. That is a big project. Again, solar, batteries, transmission. This is the golden opportunity that the government has here and in Canberra to recognise that. And I think it will be unlocked. And it's a great vision for the top end, so I wanted to share it with you today. Now, we are down on country near Alice. We're very hopeful that what we've found already with Earth AI will convert into a commercially viable resource definition. We expect to put a drill in the ground with the CLC support. We have an agreement in principle already and are working on that. Hopefully be able to say more about that in due course with my friends at the Central Land Council, my dear friends, I should say. It's been fantastic. It was very hard with the Central Land Council explaining at the top these hard truths about Mount Peak. And even though I had that time there early in my life, it takes time to build trust, and we've put a lot of time into that. I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to announce more finds at Sandover. We've already, for everyone's information, in the room found copper and lithium. That's good. And we'll be pursuing that next year as a separate business line with Earth AI and our friends there, and we're excited about that. And so that's the vision for the top end. Now, the third update for shareholders, and then I'm going to hand over the mic, is to do with the capital structure of the company. Now, this is the one area of the company that we've not really done much on all year. We've changed everything, but not the capital structure of the company. Now, this is important. It goes to the share price. It goes to how many shares are traded in the market and so on and so forth. What we have now at Tivan, and you just saw in those votes, is an incredibly supportive share registry. It's been through a big upheaval, and you just saw unanimous votes, 99.34%. That's incredible. Look around the sector this year. It's AGM season. Look next week at our sector. Look at the carnage that will happen. It will be significant. So we have a very strong and resolute register. We're very appreciative of that. And that goes to major shareholders all the way through retail, 5,000 retail holders around the country. Around 75% of Tivan stocks held in Australia. Now, we do have a problem. The stock doesn't trade enough. Let me explain why this is a problem. In finance, and again, Guy can talk to this, there's a concept of liquidity premia, which means if you're going to own an asset, it will be worth less if there's not a lot of liquidity, if it's not trading very much. If it's trading, people have the ability to manage their risk, their exposure. They can move in and out of the stock. They have confidence. The asset will be worth more. In a like-for-like situation, there will just be an incremental reappraisal of the value of that asset. On this chart, I showed two peers. These are vanadium companies in Western Australia. And you'll see here a measure of secondary market liquidity. This is how much Tivan stock turns over in dollar terms per day. And our market cap is comparable. It's above one of those, and it's basically on par with the other. So these are legitimate peers, just from a financial markets point of view. And yet you'll see our trading volumes are nowhere near the one at the top. Now that's an issue. Now it's not an issue we created. It actually reflects loyalty. This is the irony. Our shareholders are bolted on now. Our major shareholders love us, and our retail shareholders probably love us even more. There's a cult following for Tivan in this story we've created, and we're very, very grateful. The best way to unlock that issue is to issue options. And this is where my derivatives background, my high finance background kicks in. Through the incentive restructure that we did at the company, we issued long-dated, out-of-the-money options. What that means is that Tivan's share price has to go all the way up to 30 cents by mid-2026, which is consistent with project delivery timeframes that I just referenced. This is the best way to pay for performance. It's reflective of hedge funds, not mining companies. It's novel, but it's appropriate and it's aligned. It brings everyone together. We hope at some point, and I can't say when, and I can't fully commit the board here today, you'll see this very qualified language on the slide, to be able to issue options to existing shareholders, bonus options. These are free, no consideration. This is the board of Tivan recognizing the difficult journey that shareholders have been on at this company last 5-10 years. We can issue these, and all shareholders have to do, pick up a form and say thank you very much, sign off, and you'll receive these options. You'll have the same as the directors, and you'll have the same as the team. Then everyone's in this together. So we hope to be able to make an announcement on this, and we hope in time to be able to issue options more broadly so that shareholders can have this tool, and they're aligned. Because believe me, if we're on track, the share price will be a lot higher than 30 cents. That means you can hedge. It means you can speculate, and people will. And when they speculate in these options, it will flow through into speculation in the stock of Tivan. It will lift it and thereby create turnover in the stock, thereby reducing the liquidity premium and thereby unlocking the underlying value of Tivan. So this is financial engineering, but shareholders will have seen me do that already on one transaction this year. The SPIWA transaction was creatively designed. We did not have a lot of cash, and we pulled that off. That was the transaction of a lifetime. I'm very proud of it. And I hope in the period ahead soon that we'll be able to issue these bonus options. The rider being, of course, that you have to be a shareholder of Tivan. Now, we're not announcing a record date, anything like that, but that's the rider. You want the bonus options, you have to be a shareholder of Tivan. So we're putting that initiative on the table today with intent, and you'll hear more about it soon. So those are the three new bits of information. And now I'm going to move quickly to acknowledge the team. Because once again, everything that's been achieved here happens only through a team ethos and through hard work and dedication. And I'm extremely grateful to the team defined and that we've put together this year. It's a real privilege to be in this leadership position but also I really want people to understand that it's a genuine team effort, has been all year, and the work that's been put in, the enthusiasm that's been shown, the healing, the morale at the company is humming, it's absolutely humming. So I'm very proud of that. I'm just, again, very, very grateful to everyone involved. So final slide, and I want to close off here, is just what's next. This is really for the shareholders online, so I actually want to just pull things down now and hand over to my colleagues, but once again emphasize the principles that got us through this year and which will inform the developments ahead at Tivan. Hard work, integrity, and resilience. You need resilience. We will be tested. We've been tested all year, and here we are. So with that, thank you very much. That concludes my address. I'd like now to hand over to Anthony. Is still here. The plane got delayed?
Oh, I've got 3 minutes.
Okay, mate, 3 minutes. Let's do it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. I will be very quick because I should have left, but I think there's time. I'd like to reiterate what Grant has said in the introduction. You know, what we have now is an opportunity that is wide open. The work that's been done this year has been very foundational around what it is that we do going forward. My desire in being involved, when I was invited to express my interest in being part of the motion last year, was a desire to get things done. And what we're talking about here is delivering a critical minerals project, and this project has the opportunity, based on those foundations and the facilitations, the relationships that this organisation now has with stakeholders from traditional owners to the government to international large corporations, couldn't be contrasted more heavily with where they were last year than what we have today. They are absolute polar opposites. And therefore what we do have is an opportunity to have a significant impact in Darwin, in the Northern Territory, in Northern Australia, and in fact we have that opportunity to make a significant difference globally, which is a fantastic opportunity for such a small group of people, and it's a huge honour to be involved. I'm very regretful that I have to leave now, but I wanted to get up here and say what a magnificent opportunity I think this is, to commend the team and Grant on the progress that we've made this year, and to leave you in the very capable hands of Guy and Christine, who I have a lot of respect for, in addition to Grant, for the conversations. Now, I think I'm handing over to Christine, and without any respect, Christine, I'm going to leave. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Travel safe. Look, I'm delighted to be here at CDU on Larrakia country as part of the Tivan team. This has been quite a journey for me. I've been in the industry for quite a long time with senior roles, and I've been very careful about the things that I get involved in. But I have to say, Tivan and the opportunity that really the whole team is creating, for me, is joining up the opportunity of mining into the energy transition. And, you know, one of the roles I have is I'm on the board of Territory Generation up here, which is the major power provider for the whole of the territory. I'm well aware of the challenges that sit in the energy transition. We have a mind to energy harnessing technology, but building a value chain through collaboration and relationships. And I often find, I mean, the industry talks a lot about how hard it is to get things permitted, how difficult that, you know, process is. But what I well know is if we invest early, if we understand what that pathway is, we actually shave time off all that. And I think the speed with which we've actually repositioned, not only with First Nations people, Larrakia, but, you know, the EPA, the NT government, gaining some respect for having a very proper view of process has been, you know, for me, reassuring and kind of quite exciting. It's all about, I think, both maximising opportunity and minimising risk. And that's the way that you create shareholder value. You create shareholder value by understanding how you manage not only the resource and the technical pathways, but all of the things that you need to understand about your environment, physically, socially, culturally, politically, and economically. I believe we've got a clarity of values. I really like the, what I might say, assertive transparency that has been part of the way that we are choosing to operate, and building a team with skills across all of the aspects of the business. It is a, really good place to be. I like to feel that the quality of management, I mean, people sometimes ask whether ESG is rewarded by the market or understood by the market. I know it's absolutely punished by the market if you get it wrong. And a lot of understanding of environment and social and government issues really comes down to the quality of leadership and the quality of management. And I think that we are now well placed to take that forward. The First Nations component, I mean, that's been a very large part of many roles that I've actually had in Australia and in fact internationally. And I can truly say that I would not have joined this company 18 months ago. I probably wouldn't have joined it 12 months ago. I mean, it's a heck of a journey. I feel very proud and very, safe's probably an odd word, but I mean, I do. I actually feel like we have a very clear pathway to value creation, not just for us, but for our stakeholders, for our shareholders, for everyone involved in the process. So I'm not going to speak at length. I know with our little break it's been a bit long, but I'm delighted to see everyone here, and I'm really looking forward to having an opportunity, not for those of you online, another time, but for those here in the room, a chance to chat later on. So thank you very much, and on that basis I'll hand over to Guy.
Thanks very much, Christine, and I'm very pleased to be here on the Arikara land to talk to you today. So I am thrilled now to be formally a member of the board of Tivan. And so why is it such a thrilling opportunity? And I've talked in my previous roles quite length about the great opportunity this country has in the energy transition. So Australia is very, very lucky again to be endowed with the capacity to be a green energy hub for the world, and also to provide, particularly in the Tivan case, we're very, very lucky, as Grant said, to have one of the best, or the best vanadium resource in the world, which is going to be a very critical part of the energy transition right across the globe. So Australia is almost uniquely placed to actually be a very large beneficiary of the energy transition, which is in full swing globally right now. And that's an amazing opportunity, but it's an opportunity that's got to be realised. It's just not going to happen, and it actually requires hard work and dedication and dealing with any number of challenges. I think the capacity that Tivan has shown over this past year, particularly under Grant's very strong leadership, is that it's up to meeting those challenges and to realise that great opportunity. And it's going to create value for a whole range of people. It's going to create value for all the shareholders here and online. It's going to create value for the traditional owners. It's going to create value for this part of the world in particular, and it's going to create value for the country. And that's an amazing opportunity. So, this is a really important part of what's going on in the country at the moment. It's evidenced by the fact that the government's just announced that, a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister announced that it's now upping the ante in terms of support for critical minerals to $4 billion. That's a material chunk of government spending. So, the government is seeing, the federal government is seeing the opportunity here, the Northern Territory government is seeing the opportunity here. But we are the ones who actually got to realise that opportunity, and I think we've got the fantastic capacity to do it. The other point which I think is really important, and this comes through the sort of work I've been doing for the last while in terms of sustainable finance, is that the transition, which is underway around the world, is going to happen in a much more sustainable way than it has in the past. And that has any number of elements. It means taking appropriate care of the environment. Now, mining, by its very definition, is not going to do no harm to the environment. In the end, rocks are coming out of the ground, and that does have an impact on the environment. But there are more or less sustainable ways to do it, and Tivan is very much approaching it with sustainability at the forefront. It also means working with the traditional owners and alongside the traditional owners, and not just talking to them whenever you feel like it, but actually working with them in partnership throughout the journey. And that's going to be a very important part of the sustainable finance. The other great opportunity that we have, particularly here in Middle Arm, I think, is the capacity to bring in solar, as Grant mentioned, the great solar potential that the NT in particular has, to power the plant, to power our processing plant in Middle Arm, and to deliver a green critical mineral to the world rather than a black critical mineral to the world or a red critical mineral to the world, which is the space I've been in the last couple of years. So there are more or less sustainable ways to go about this, and Tivan is very much approaching this from a sustainable point of view. And that's actually important for a number of reasons, but one of the critical reasons is, in the not too distant future, the only finance that's going to be available is for people doing it and companies doing it in a sustainable way. So we need to be positioning ourselves for that now and from the get-go, and that's what we're doing. So that's a very important part of delivering the value to you, the shareholders, in the medium to long term, is actually that we approach it sustainably, because that's the only way we're going to be able to access the large pools of capital that we're going to need to realise this vision and to deliver you this great opportunity. So I think that there's a large number of elements which make Tivan a really attractive proposition. The other thing, I suppose, is having been involved in the policy making aspect of this over the last few years, I think it's an incredibly different perspective you actually get from being there at the coalface is not the right phrase to use in this space, but anyway, at the green face. To being there on the front line and seeing how it actually goes rather than how it goes from a policy point of view or from a meeting room in Canberra's point of view, which is often somewhat distant from the actual reality. So I think, through the involvement directly in Tivan, hopefully enable us to have sensible conversation and with people in Canberra, with people in here in Darwin, with people in Perth, to make sure that policy is moving in the right direction to realise Australia's great opportunity in this, and not actually in a counterproductive way to realise that opportunity. So, I think absolutely working with the best interest of Tivan shareholders at the forefront, but also really giving us the opportunity to deliver the goods for the opportunity for the country as a whole. And, particularly for the community here, I think it's an amazing opportunity. NT, a bit like my home state, South Australia, have actually really great, really amazing capacity to be at the forefront of the green transition globally, not just in this country, but right around the world. And the opportunity, that's an amazing opportunity which we just can't afford to squander. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be on the board of Tivan and to be able to participate directly. I've known Grant for a long time, and seen his energy and enthusiasm in the financial space, and if he, as you've all seen, he's absolutely delivering that in the Tivan space. He's very much the energizer bunny of the critical minerals sector, and just looking at the achievements which have been delivered over the past 12 months, but looking back over, knowing Grant, as I said, over the last 15 years is not exactly a surprise given what he's done in his financial past. So as I said, absolutely thrilled to be here with you today to help try and realise the value that you've seen in investing in Tivan. And I think it's an amazing opportunity, and a huge one for you as shareholders, for the people here in the Northern Territory, in Darwin, and for the country as a whole, and absolutely looking forward to the journey ahead. Thanks. Now, so now we have a bit of video entertainment, so we have, well, not entertainment, some commentary from our technical advisory group, which is an amazing collection of people. I've met Professor Maria at the Vanadium Battery at UNSW, which is just up the road from Uni of New South Wales, just up the road from me where I live in Sydney. So we're going to hear a bit from all the three amazing members of our technical advisory group now. So let's roll the tape.
Hi everyone. So back in Q1, following the acquisition of Speewah, we turned our attention to building out the skills and the capabilities and the networks that we expect to need at the company over the years ahead to facilitate the development of the full renewable value chain from mine site all the way to the grid. We put together a wish list of people that we thought had those capabilities and also the right cultural fit at Tivan, and we were delighted in Q2 when Simon and Maria and Stefan decided to join us. Since that time, they've been working really closely with the executive team at Tivan, along with the project team, advancing us in rapid time and also influencing key decisions now and in terms of what we've got ahead. And of course, we're looking forward to that continuing. So without further ado, let's hear from Tivan's Technical Advisory Group.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm actually talking to you today from the Western Australian Ningaloo coastline in my caravan. My name's Simon Flowers. So I'm a Darwin local and a chartered engineer and project development and delivery specialist. I got to know Grant and the Tivan team really through my role as the project director for the Middle Arm Sustainable Development Precinct. And the precinct really is an ambitious project aimed at attracting large industrial development and investment. And in that role, my team was specifically engaged to, design the marine land-based supporting infrastructure and also deliver a complex, comprehensive environmental assessment that really aims to reduce social and environmental impacts, but also maximising economic benefits. In terms of the Tivan engineers, they're a great bunch of passionate professionals. The level of detail and the pace in which they're working is first rate in my view. But really importantly, just in the way they identify problems, of which there's always going to be many in any industrial development, as they arise, and put in early steps and solutions to resolve them is second to none. In terms of, Tivan's turnaround and reputation locally now, it's been probably the word unparalleled comes to mind in regards to this, in my view. I certainly have seen a huge amount of effort going into being open and transparent in discussions with all stakeholders from the Tivan team. What I'm loving about in this role working with Tivan is looking at both that strategic nature of obviously critical minerals being a way to solve the decarbonisation problem globally, but also what's critical for me is working with a team that values that pathway and how to deliver those sustainable outcomes in the development life cycle for a major industrial facility at the end of the day. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
I'm Maria Skoudas-Kazakis. I'm an emeritus professor at the University of New South Wales in chemical engineering, where I've been working for 40 years actually on the vanadium redox flow battery. We actually invented the vanadium redox flow battery, starting with our very first experiment in at the end of 1983, filed the first patent in 1986. We were very fortunate to get funding from the state and federal government to support our research. And in early 1990, we actually were able to license the technology to Mitsubishi Chemicals and Kashima-Kita Electric Power Corporation, who took our research, scaled it up and built and tested the very first 200 kilowatt, 800 kilowatt hour vanadium battery at the Kashima-Kita power station in Japan. We're really excited that the time has actually come. The whole world is moving towards this transition to renewable energy, moving away from fossil fuels. And everyone realizes now, finally, that you can't have renewable energy, you can't have solar, you can't have wind without energy storage. Lithium batteries have been trying to fill in that space for a while now, but people are realizing that there are dangers associated with lithium batteries, although the research is trying to improve all of that. But also for longer duration, when we're going to complete renewables and and zero fossil fuels, we really need to have longer duration energy storage, and that's where flow batteries are really important, because they are, as we increase the energy storage capacity, then the cost per kilowatt hour drops away dramatically. So vanadium redox flow batteries are ideal for that. They also have very good minimal environmental impact, because the electrolyte can be reused indefinitely. So that's why they're attracting a lot of attention, and we're very excited about the future. To be able to now work closely with the engineers who are looking at designing and very soon implementing the technology in terms of the electrolyte production, because the critical part of the battery is the electrolyte. I'm really excited that Tivan is really committed not only to just mine the vanadium and process it and extract vanadium, but also to produce electrolyte locally here in Australia, not only to meet our local demand, which is going to be very important, but potentially even for exporting. So working closely now with the engineers is allowing me to transfer all the know-how that I have, all the knowledge that I have, and helping them to identify, to design the electrolyte manufacturing plants, select equipment that's going to be needed, and then start doing testing and evaluation of the electrolyte as well. Well, industry has always been extremely important in the research that I've done throughout all my career. We've been funded by government and both state and government and federal government, but also by industry groups. Working together with industry is really critical to keep you focused and not just do esoteric research, which is really not going to be of any practical value, but to have very targeted research which will achieve the outcomes that industry needs. Otherwise, they'll never be able to take it up and implement your research and development.
I'm Stéphane Leblanc. I'm a French Canadian. I worked in the mining industry for 33 years with Rio Tinto. I work across many countries around the world, in Africa, China, US, Australia a little bit also, and different countries in Europe. I work also in different commodities, aluminum, copper, iron ore, titanium, and different critical mineral in the last 33 years. I've been working in the last couple of months with the engineer of Tivan, and I very appreciate my discussion with them. It's clear they are very, very smart, very dedicated, and open to challenge. Personally, I like to challenge people and try to bring my experience, what I learned across my last 33 years with them, and I can see that they are listening. I want to bring them that it's good to be perfect in a project, but at the end of the day, a project has to be profitable. And I like always to say, and it's what I was saying in the past, but I like to challenge people that stopping studying, think big, have a big vision, but it's very important to start quickly and small, and to start to build relations, learn from our mistake, and build on those to have at the end an amazing project. The other thing that is important for me as mining or working for mining company is the importance of taking care of the community where we operate. And following many discussions I had with Ren, it was clear in my mind that taking care of the First Nation where Tivan will operate was very, very critical for him. It's for those reasons I decided to jump in helping Tivan to be one of the best leader in vanadium production in the world. I work with different stakeholders around the world as a resource company, and taking care or having good relation with the community where we operate, it was in my view very critical. Taking time to understand the culture of the people where we operate is critical to have a success in the project we develop. And as like when I was in Rio as a major company across the world, we have to make sure we adapt ourselves to the community where we operate and not trying to make the community adapting to our culture of company. Being on the ground for me, as a former leader, was always very, very important to be grounded with what happened with the community or with the employees. It was critical. So as soon as we find a way to bring me there, I will be very happy to go back to Australia.
So what we're going to do now, they've heard from our world-class team, you'll see incredible people that joined Tivan this year. I had a wish list of about 10 people when we got to the end of the Speewah transaction. And right at the top, Simon, Maria, and Stefan, for their incredible standing, prestige, their expertise, capabilities, networks, but also because we wanted a certain culture at Tivan. They're enjoying it. We're so pleased that they're with us. It's an incredible privilege. So for the last 15 minutes, because we did lose some time, we're going to do our fireside. So I'd like to invite Guy and Christine up, and we're just going to have a chat. I covered off a lot of the questions that we received during the open day, things about Speewah, traditional owners, and so on and so forth. There was a question about the pilot plant for the Tivan Plus technology. And so the rough time frame is another 6 to 9 months of development work in the labs with the team at CSIRO, and it is an absolutely integrated effort at Waterford and Perth. And that will put us in a position to start working on a full-scale pilot. This is what's required. If you're going to do novel tech, raise money off novel tech, you need to build a pilot. You need to prove that it works and move up from grams to kilos to tons. The pilot looks like it'll take shape from 2025 onwards. In terms of financing it, which was the thrust of one of the questions, there's various options available to Tivan. We expect a lot of support from government, but we've already been approached by very large-scale commercial players looking at creative deals involving debt, which will enable us to build. And to do it here in Darwin is very important to me. I was with Minister Manison today on a press conference this morning. We had to explain why we wanted to do this in Darwin, and it's because knowledge is not bounded. You know, knowledge can be transferred from Perth to Darwin, of course, but it's also because I want to make sure that there are real deliverables here and that we're building capabilities close to the community where we're operating in and close to the resource as well. So the pilot belongs in Darwin. It'll be in East Arm. The shovel in the ground is more like 2025. Various ways we can fund that without intruding on the development pathway for Speewah, the fast track as such. So that's all I wanted to really say on the fireside. We're going to take some questions from the floor, but before we do that, there's just one outstanding question from shareholders, and this goes to Christine. Christine, would you mind narrating why, in your experience, our collaboration and our agreement, our strategic partnership with CSIRO is different? And maybe reference here your extensive experience in working with CSIRO. Thank you.
Sure. Look, I've worked with CSIRO in various capacities for probably 20 years. And that includes being part of their advisory council in the resources sector. I was actually part of the external review panel, including international people for the resources function. So I've had a pretty good exposure to CSIRO, its amazing capability. I mean, I do have to confess I'm a bit of a CSIRO groupie, really. But, you know, what I do know is it's an organisation that is incredibly careful. And so I've watched the development of this agreement and the preparedness to move well beyond a particular project that's sort of time limited to a relationship and a commitment to work together, and have been really impressed about the level of preparedness CSIRO have had. And it is based on, I guarantee, incredible due diligence on their part to actually make sure that not only is there a kind of real pathway in terms of the technology, but that we actually have people that can work together and that they can see a pathway to market, because those are all the things that are part of CSIRO's mission. So you know, and I know that it's hard to always understand why just doing a joint project with CSIRO might be different, but I can tell you when the new CSIRO CEO makes a decision to make a public statement in support of that, that is really significant. So I feel quite touched from a Tivan perspective that, you know, this represents a lot of faith and trust in us, and I think it's, you know, well placed, hopefully, by an incredible national institution that most countries would give their right arm to have. So yeah, the CSIRO story.
All right, we are over to the floor. And so please, Larry from New Zealand.
Larry Coombs. First of all, Grant, I'd just like to thank you on behalf of shareholders for the fantastic job you've done with the company.
Thanks, Larry.
You've brought forward an absolutely superb team, management, board of directors, and the advisory group, and for that, we're eternally grateful. Now, I do have to say, the question I have, a number of shareholders followed me into the company, and of course, something that I'm always being asked is funding. Now, the federal government, the state government, they've all got money going into the critical minerals industry. I think I saw this morning that $130 million went to Fortescue. What I'd just like to know, if you can elaborate, is how are we getting on with funding from some of these organisations, and particularly private ones like Sumitomo, considering we are pretty short of money in the bank?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Larry. And for people online, Larry thanked me. I appreciate that, Larry, and for your support, over the past year through the campaign. There's a lot of shareholders that I've got to know, and in some of those really testing times, it's been great to reach out to people, explain what's going on, take that feedback in a courteous, respectful way, and to be able to have these dialogues. They're really important. Oftentimes, over the past year, if you're not listening, you could be heading down a wrong track, or not taking on board the perspectives of the owners of the company. So whenever there's constructive feedback, criticism even, I'm always open to it, and we've got a great relationship with so many of our shareholders. So on your question, Larry, I think the question was about extensive, tangible government support for Tivan. Now we have this relationship with the EFA, and there's a $300 million letter of support. It's still in place. It needs to be moved from Mount Peak to Speewah. We've done extensive discussions with that. I expect that will happen. It will happen at the right time in terms of the project maturity, but it's still there, and we're grateful for that. But that doesn't get you through the near-term stage gates, right? And so there are, of course, a whole smorgasbord of government agencies looking to support the critical minerals sector. It's ARENA, there's the EFA, which I already mentioned, CEFC. Guy can list through all the acronyms with me. The most important right now for us is the Critical Minerals Office. And we're in regular dialogue, have been all year. They're tracking our developments. They're, I think, also impressed and probably even grateful that we've forged ahead in the way that we have. And there'll be another round of development grants, and we'll look to that. And I think as well, as we get into, and this is where I hand to Guy, the budget session in May of next year. This is being already framed by the Treasurer as a big green budget. There will likely be other things. I think those shareholders need to be aware that I certainly don't expect the federal government just to start cutting checks left and right. It's not appropriate. And oftentimes it's not appropriate, Larry, you'll appreciate this, because they don't want to be subsidising the sorts of things that were happening at TNG. It's absolutely not appropriate that they do that. So the big ticket items, I think, that are down the track, EFA support at the right time, potentially CEFC as well. The Value Adding and Resources Fund is going to come on stream 2026. That's perfect for companies looking to step down the value chain. We're right, we're the exemplar of that. So we expect key support, all the way through those stages to crowd in private investment. But make no mistake, we have to raise money. Of course we do. We're talking to all the right people. As I said before, we've got superior access to capital markets, and that's the path we're on. So it will be a bit of both is the short answer. But Guy, I think you're obviously uniquely well placed to describe the strategy perhaps of government as we progress, but even more broadly outside of Tivan and the critical minerals sector.
Yeah, I mean, the government, the Commonwealth government here in Australia has announced a bunch of high-level building blocks for the energy transition, but to date, by and large, hasn't really provided much detail behind them. But then a couple of weeks ago, as Grant mentioned, Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, said they'd originally promised that they would come out in a few weeks' time in what's called the mid-year budget update, basically. Jim Chalmers said a couple of weeks back that actually, no, they're going to work them up and they're going to come out in the May budget. So that, I hope and expect, will provide the detail behind a lot of these large announcements that have taken place over the last 12 months or so, including, from particularly in our case, the $4 billion support to the critical minerals sector that the PM announced in the US a few weeks back. I'd say the other thing which is important to think about from the Tivan point of view, and particularly relevant, I think, for here in Middle Arm, is I think they're very much looking at the opportunities to provide things like common use infrastructure rather than a grant, as Grant mentioned, to one company in particular, or provide a program which is supporting the industry or the sector as a whole rather than this piece of money for that particular company in the form of a grant. So I think but I think that's where we're actually well set up in terms of, for want of a better term, ticking a lot of the boxes that are likely going to be required to be able to access those sort of pools of funding. So I think from our point of view, the timing is going to be pretty reasonable in that we're going to have the detail of those plans with any luck in the May budget here next year. So I think, we will be talking, as Grant said, both, with the Critical Minerals Office, but also other parts of the bureaucracy in Canberra, for want of a better term, including the Treasury, including the Department of Climate Change and Energy and Water, and from our point of view, also the Department of Industry, particularly in terms of the move into the battery side of things. That's something that the government has said, and Ed Husick, the relevant minister, has said any number of times. That's a particular pet of his, is actually Australia moving up the value-added chain, and particularly in the battery space. So I think we will, from our point of view, the timing I think should be pretty good, that we should have the clarity on the sort of support from the Commonwealth Government in particular around about May next year. But I think, as Grant said, the funding is going to be mostly about co-investment between the public and the private sector. So there will be absolutely a need for us to very much be tapping the private sector, but from having seen that from the other side for the last few years, private sector capital is going to be much more willing to come alongside public sector capital, particularly where, and where both are sharing some of the risk rather than all the risk being on the private side.
The one last point I'd make, Larry, and I've made this comment before, so just let me emphasise this. One of the reasons the board asked shareholders and gratefully received the support for Resolution 15, which involves being able to issue shares up to 25% in 1 year, and that's a lot, right? One of the reasons we wanted that is because that opens the door to strategic investment. Now, we've spoken about this before, that we've got big companies, funds as well, in long-term due diligence processes, and this is under the hood. And if a strategic investor comes through, it's that placement capacity which gives us the freedom to make that decision. So there's nothing to be concerned about that we asked for that. On the contrary, it provides us the opportunity to continue these negotiations, and we're grateful to particularly major shareholders for supporting that. It's very rare that that resolution gets up when asked for, but we appreciate that. The context is strategic investment because it enables those diligence processes to continue through next year and for us to make a decision. But as I said before, in strategic investment, we're not going to make an impulsive decision because then you're in for good as well. And as part of their due diligence, in fact, the demand from our side is, okay, if we're going to let you into this data room and find out even more about the company than the market knows, you have to sign off on buying into shares and locking them up for a year or two. Now, that actually works against the liquidity principles that I was explaining before, okay? So we need to do quite a lot of work on the capital structure to invigorate the market as well as the turnover in the stock, and all of these things will be very, very conducive for the share price. Tivan is a major proponent at the precinct, but the cultural overlay here, the local dynamics obviously take priority. It's a very important precinct commercially, as we've discussed, strategically for Australia. It's the intersection of any number of industries and future promise as well. At the same time, this Larrakia country. And some people will say native title's been extinguished. I don't think of it that way. So there's a lot of different overlays which are specific to Darwin. Us inking an agreement with this CSIRO is not that germane to that. I think, in fact, the agreement we signed with Larrakia is much more important. The signal impact of Tivan, a major proponent, working hand in glove with Larrakia Energy, I think that changed the mood up here, certainly. I'm sure it did, absolutely. And again, Mark's here today, he's the chair of Larrakia. That's where I believe those inclusive efforts that we're working together with. Now, make no mistake, NT government's here as well. They're very excited about the idea of us bringing technology to Darwin. I think Simon Flowers said it on the video. You know, I think oftentimes it's like technology belongs on the East Coast, West Coast. This is cutting edge tech. And if we can build it here in Darwin, you know, we really, really want to, and I think we can. And I know we've got the Infrastructure Commissioner, Major Projects Commissioner, I can see them nodding furiously. And this would be so great, you know, for Darwin. And it wouldn't change the economics on it. So I see why not. I say why not. And I think it's that sort of engagement from Tivan, having AGMs here, doing largest vanadium electrolyte facility in the world outside China, building this incredible pilot, you know, bringing in real Indigenous pathways. We're here at Charles Darwin University. Charles Darwin University, you know, incredible institution in the territory. There's 250,000 people in the territory, 22,000 at this place, right? Building those pathways, networks, thinking about the next generations, all these things. You bring tech to Darwin, it's awesome. And so I think it's that, I think CSIRO's cachet is real, Christine's explained it. To me, it's the impacts beyond just a project like that, which resonate. But I do think it's fair to say, like Tivan's, you know, we've moved the needle up here this year. You know, the distant memories are distant now. And I think even the audience today it's a great show. You know, there's 4 or 5 shareholders here, but look at the audience. And it's because people want to know about us and people want to understand the plans. And I think, you know, I've certainly felt this sort of warm embrace, and obviously it's been reciprocated, but I'm enormously proud of that. And I love this idea of Tivan emerging as a champion for the territory. The territory's never had that. You name me one company that's authentically Territorian. I can't think of one. You've got companies that come through, fly by. A lot of the time it's just dial it in. That's all that is. We're here for good. So I'm very proud of that. I'm grateful to the board. I think actually I moved headquarters before Christine and Guy joined, but I was intent on doing that from the start, and here we are. So I think it's broader, Larry, than just a pilot. The nature of the engagement has got texture, underlay, overlay. It's integrated, and it's why we're here today.
Yeah. I mean, it probably doesn't hurt to have such a credible organisation vote with its feet, really. But I would agree that, you know, there are overlays in all of this, and one of the things I like about the Tivan kind of experience for me is actually the preparedness to acknowledge the complexity and then actually go, we just need really clear plans. We need to make sure we understand. And it's not any one thing that's going to deliver success. It's actually lining up all of those things.
Any further questions? Are we live or? Ah, good. Okay. All right, we're right on 2 hours, and I'm conscious that we've had a few gaps in that, and I am very grateful to our AV team. It's not easy. It sounds easy to do these events. There's been an enormous amount of planning. Thank you to Helen Yang in Darwin. Thank you to our AV team. Thank you to Charles Darwin University and for our team to putting this on for sure. It's a last call for questions from the floor, mindful of the time. Okay, I might have to say something formal, so you just give me 1 sec here. Kat, Kevin, are there any formal procedures that I have to say? I think I have to say that we've collected all the votes, right? Tony, do we have the votes? Oh. Really? Okay, I nearly threw the votes away. Can you imagine? I have to read this out. Just bear with me because this is what is required to close an AGM without having to do it again. Thank you, mate. Okay, so I think we've exhausted the questions from the floor. Thank you for those. And we've addressed the ones online. And now it's my happy duty to announce the outcomes of the 16 resolutions. Now, this includes all the proxies, which were obviously the majority of the votes and the votes for the floor. Now, rather than reading out big numbers, we're just going to read through the percentages that were for, and you can draw your own conclusions, and then we'll be able to close the meeting and have a drink. Okay, Resolution 1, adoption of the remuneration report. That was carried, 99.3%. Election of Christine Charles. You made it, Christine, congratulations. 99.6. Election of Guy de Bell, again, 99.86. I think you made an error there, Tony. I'm sure Christine was higher, but we'll find out in the ASX announcement on Monday, and you will have a case to answer, mate, to Christine, so good luck with that. Yeah, exactly. There will be official results on the ASX this afternoon. And so ratification of KRR shares, Resolution 4, in favour 99.56. Ratification of placement shares, 99.58. That's Resolution 5. Issued to myself, 99.47 in favour. Issued to Dr. Robinson, 99.22 in favour. Issued to Christine, 99.25. That's Resolution 8, if we're counting. Resolution 9, issued to Guy, 99.24. Approval of awards plan, 99.51. Resolution 11, the grant to Christine Charles, 98.83 in favour. Resolution 12, grant to Dr. Robinson, 98.83. Resolution 13, grant to Guy de Bell, 98.8. Resolution 14, the grant to myself, 99.45. Resolution 15, approval of 10% placement capacity, 84.4. And finally, Resolution 16, renewal of proportional takeover provisions, 99.45. And with that, I believe I can say thank you. And to everyone online, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your support through this tumultuous year. The foundations have been set. We're going to build a spectacular company from here. So please understand the journey that we're on. Please understand the opportunities await. Please stay engaged, including through novel methods that I've described in the meeting today. We'll stay open, transparent. We're going to continue to work hard, and you see more into next year. This year was about the transition. Next year we deliver, and we deliver on behalf of stakeholders. We deliver on behalf of shareholders. Those two things converge. That's how to build a company of durable value. So with that, thank you very much, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you. Okay, that's it. Let's have a drink.